A couple of months ago, I quit my corporate exec job to launch my debut novel. And I made that decision based on a dream I had the night before I pulled the plug. Hey, I'm Viv. Welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, welcome to the Viv Lee-Lauss Show, where I take you through the behind the scenes of launching my debut novel, Call of Matter, as well as my debut series, Erastasis, as well as all the weird and wonderful things that happen in between, how I got to this point, what's coming up next. You are getting all of the dish. So today's episode, I want to take you through something that is very near and dear to my heart. Was a very emotional moment throughout my entire journey of my 35 years on this planet. And it's about what actually led to the decision of walking away from the corporate dream, this corporate life I'd spent 14 years building, walking away from this corporate exec job with all the amazing things that come with it, money, the status, the title, the perks, and all of that. How I worked tirelessly for it for, 20 something years of my life to get to this point, and how I pulled the plug on all of it based on all the events that were happening during that week leading up to that event. So this is back earlier this year, a couple of months ago. It was still tail end of winter, beginning of spring. We're sitting in July now, so actually quite a few months ago now, really. But at that point, it was 7.5 months, and I wrote a 140-page manuscript while working full-time as an exec. How did I do that? I mean, I will create an episode later on to really describe how that process worked for me. But I would say first draft really wrote itself. First draft of the series, the planning for it, first draft of Call of Matter, the first book of the series. The way my brain works for the first draft, it's really like a broadcast. So the ideas, dialogue, scenes, characters, setting, they form in my mind fully so that I see it. So I'll be making the bed, and I will have two characters literally having a dialogue in this moment. I'll just be doing my own thing, and then suddenly this will start up in my mind. I don't know what triggers it. I don't really know why, but I actually went and researched it. I just came back from vacation for 2 weeks, and I really fell down the rabbit hole on this topic because I was just so curious to understand why that is, because I learned through the funniest way possible that not everyone's brain works that way, actually. So I will tell that in a separate episode. But either way, so the first draft for me, that's how it works. So a scene will broadcast, a setting will broadcast, whatever, and it's a race to get to my computer to start documenting it, writing down what the people are saying, describing what I'm seeing in my head, and all this kind of stuff. So that's first draft. Second draft is really sitting down, figuring out, okay, how do I get from that scene to this scene to this scene to this scene? And it's about rounding out the characters, right? They come as just a snapshot. I'll have a scene, but I won't know how they got to the scene and how they leave the scene or how they became this way. So for me, it's really, draft 2 is about piecing it together. Draft 3 is polishing, and draft 3 is what went to my beta readers. And so drafts 1, 2, and 3 took place through 7.5 months. How did I do that? Evenings, weekends, on the go. So how I write, I use Microsoft OneNote, which maybe there's other authors listening to this or watching this, and they're like, what? Really? What? OneNote? There's inefficiencies to OneNote, but the reason why I use it and why it's efficient for me is because so much of my writing happens during these broadcast moments, out of nowhere. I'm at the dentist. I'm driving. Oh my God, driving is a really hard one because I got a lot of broadcasts while I'm driving. And so it's this need to remember all of it. I've even had times where I've had to pull over because the broadcast was so intense, so vivid, and so good that I was okay, I need to pull over and write this down right now. So you're gonna tell me ask me why don't you do voice notes? I don't know. I'm not a voice note person. I tried because I thought this would be more efficient, but it's not. Somehow I can't describe it verbally in the same way that I can type it out. Maybe it's because, I'll explain in a separate video, but I think it's the sound of my own voice is distracting from the act of documenting the broadcast. Either way, so 7.5 months, drafts 1, 2, and 3. Anyways, what I was saying is why I use OneNote is because I have Microsoft 365 for business, also privately, even when I was working in corporate, I had my own account, and it syncs like synchronously. So I'll be like writing something down here. So if I'm at home, I'm like writing something down while I'm at the sink, I don't know, loading the dishwasher. And then I'll put it down, finish loading the dishwasher. 2 minutes later, I'm like at my laptop, everything's synced, and I can pick up from where I left off. So that's why I use it. I've done a lot of research. My husband went and did a lot of research. It's really the only tool that syncs so synchronously because a lot of the really good writing tools that people use, there's no real like web app version that does synchronous syncing, which is what I really need for my own personal writing style. Everyone's different. That's the way I write. Out for a walk, like sometimes I'm like swimming and have a thought, making the bed and have thoughts. Sometimes I will wake up in the middle of the night with a thought and need to write it down. So that's why I need it on my phone. But anyways, I would say like, especially for first drafts, half the book is written on my phone. I cannot stress that enough. Like how for me, that's why I was able to get so much done in 7.5 months because I don't need like quiet blocks where I'm sitting there for hours at a time to write. I write on the go. I can literally sometimes we'll be driving somewhere, my husband will be driving, and in that 30-minute drive, I will like bash out a whole chapter because it is flooding so intensely in my mind for that 30 minutes that I'm just like literally consumed in a totally different world on my phone. I get it all out, and then I'm like, oh, we're here. I get out of the car, and like the chapter's already written. That's like the first draft of that chapter's done. And draft 2 is just about like figuring out how I get from the previous chapter to this chapter, how I get from this chapter to the next chapter. And then draft 3 is about like smoothing it out. So 7.5 months, I'd written it. And by the week that we're talking about, so right now we're talking about in real time, like this week where I decided to quit my corporate career, like what was happening, what was going through my head, what was actually happening IRL. So at this point in this week, like I had finished my 3rd draft. Like I was in a state where I'm like, I'm ready to go to beta readers, professional beta readers. So I think anyone who's watched any of my previous episodes, I paid a company who organized professional beta readers for me, who read in my genre, who were based in English-speaking countries, because of course my book is in English, so this is important. In my target group, people who don't know me, actually the manuscript was anonymized, so they had no clue who I was, just the book, just the manuscript, no biases, and they went and read the book and provided feedback. So at that point, actually it was my sister who helped me research the service. Everyone has been like pitching in to help make this a success. People have been so supportive here. So everyone's been doing their bits and pieces here and there to help me out. But my sister helped me research the service, and I was like ready to go, which I think anyone who's ever put like their creative work or their heart and brain matter out there, it is a very nerve-wracking moment. I think at this point I had some people who were close to me read it, so I knew it wasn't like garbage because quite honestly, my husband had read draft 2. My sister had read part of draft 2. She read draft 3 for sure, which was the beta reader version. My husband was the one who read draft 2 all the way through. And actually for draft 2, that was like late last year. I wasn't even fully done yet. But my husband actually put the file on his Kobo. He went on a business trip and he was reading it for like the first time. Like he hadn't read any of it till this point. So at this point, that was October. So July, August, September, October. So I think I was like 4 months into it by this point. And at that point I was basically like done draft 2. And he took it with him on his Kobo on his business trip. And I remember he actually didn't say much. He was like very busy. You know how business trips are. Like, I mean, it's you're in meetings the whole day, and then the evenings you're trying to answer emails, you're at networking dinners, you're busy, you're exhausted. So he came home, and that's the moment he told me, he's like, I think you need to have a real serious think about whether you want to quit your job to take this seriously now. Which was, I mean, simultaneously like terrifying, but also so empowering. Like, this isn't my husband. So my husband and I, we've been married for 7 years. We've been together for 15. We've been living together for 10. So we both moved to Germany 10 years ago to be together. For those of you who haven't seen my previous episode about like my origin story, my husband's Austrian, I'm Canadian, and we both met in Hong Kong while on student exchange 15 years ago. So 2 separate continents, met on one continent, dated there for 5 months, dated long distance for 5 years, Canada, Austria. And then 10 years ago, decided to both move to Germany to start our lives together. And then 2 years after moving here, we got married. So my husband and I, we've had shared finances since we moved in together, even before we got married. So we've been like in this together for the past decade. So like my husband saying this, if you think about it, like this is his well-being too, like his financial well-being. I mean, last year, mid-June, when Erastasis fell into my head, I was actually in this exact room. That's actually why I'm shooting here today. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I'm always shooting in different locations in my apartment, in our apartment. But I am shooting here today because this is actually where it all started. I was not sitting, but I was actually standing in this exact spot when Erastasis fell into my head. When the first character, Cassidy's song, fell into my head. Cassidy's not even the protagonist. She is a side character. She was always going to be a side character, but she's actually the one who fell into my head first. I was standing here at this moment, staring at that mirror in front of the sink, about to brush my teeth, having woken up on that Sunday morning with Erastasis just clunk in my head. So this room will always have kind of this bathroom will always have a very special place in my heart and my head. But either way, that was mid-June, and I started writing this thing. It kind of like started taking over my life. And my husband, of course, was like very supportive of it. He was just like, oh my God, you're so passionate about this. You're having so much fun doing this. And there was like no promise of it. When I started writing this, I wasn't thinking about like, I'm going to write a book. Like I'm going to like publish it. I was just like, I have this incredible story and I need to tell it. That's actually kind of how it felt. Like it was just clonk. The story fell in my head. It started playing in 4K in real time in my head in such vividness that I was like, oh my God, I need to like write this down. I needed like an outlet for it. It was just so much creative energy all at once that I needed to put it somewhere or I was gonna explode. That's what it felt like. It just felt like so much energy that needed a place to put it. Like, have you ever had it where you just like felt like you needed to go out for a run or like go to the gym, like power it out because you just had like so much adrenaline and cortisol in your body from like maybe like a super stressful week or something like this. Like I just had that feeling, but from a creative perspective, like it was just, I had so much creative vividness all at once. I was like, I need to like put it somewhere, which is why I started writing because that just felt like the easiest way. Like I know how to type, I know the English language, I know how to like formulate my thoughts, like I know how to like formulate things I'm seeing in my head, whatever. And so that just felt like the easiest medium that was available immediately. I think if I would have been a musician or a cinematographer, then maybe I would have chosen a different medium. I don't know. Some people, maybe they write music, they take photos, I don't know what. But for me, it was like words, medium. I see it, I write the stuff down. So that's what the first couple of weeks of this looked like. Maybe not weeks, but like the first couple of days for sure when it took over my life, I was like, I just need somewhere to put it. And I would say by the time, like within days, I drafted the whole series, so 7 books. And I already, like not draft like all the prose, but like I knew how the story was gonna start and how it was gonna end and how we were roughly going to get there. And I knew it was gonna be 7 books and the characters started falling into place and all this kind of stuff. So within a couple of days, I was like, okay, I think I'm writing a series. So it kind of, like, it wasn't like I sat down one day and was like, I'm gonna write a book. Let's think about what this book's gonna be. It was just like one day I was standing in this exact spot and this world fell into my head. I started clunking it out because I had no other place to put it. And then from there, a couple of days later, I was like, oh, like, I think I'm writing a book. Like, I think this is what's happening now. So all along then, this goes on for a couple of weeks and it becomes a couple of months. And by the time my husband reads it on his Kobo on his business trip on the plane and comes back, he's like, love, this is legit. Like, he's like, this is really good. And it was just moment, I could just see the look on his face where he even, it's not like he was surprised it was good. I mean, my husband's literally the most empowering, supportive person I've ever had in my life. And so he always believes I can do everything, you know, even when it's like not true. But for this, like, I could see the surprise even on his face when he said it. He was like, look, like, for me, I've been so supportive because you're so passionate and you're so happy while you're doing it and you love it. And so I'm like, yeah, okay, go do this. He's like, but it wasn't until I actually read it that I was like, oh my God, like, you wrote this? Like, this came out of your head? Like, this is what you've been, like, clunking away at for the past couple of months without me knowing? Because, like, he didn't read any of it, right? Like, because I was like, it's not ready. Like, what are you even reading? And it wasn't until he got draft 2 that he was like, what? Like, this is what you did in like 3 months, 4 months, like 3.5 months? He was like, you need to really do a serious think about this. Like, he's like this is like a talent. Like, it just came out of nowhere. He's like, I didn't even know that you could do this, that you had these ideas and these thoughts. Like, this is a man who's known me for, like, at that point, like 14 years. He was like, I didn't even know this is what was going on. And it was at the point that he actually reminded me, you know, reading this, it reminded me that the night we met, you actually mentioned that you always wanted to write a book. And at this point, like, oh my God, like, literally my past life came like delusion into my mind, because I remembered, I was like, oh yeah, you are right. Like, actually, when I was in uni, I remember having 2 story ideas, which is not Erastasis, by the way. They were like totally different, separate ideas. And one was a sci-fi novel, and the other one was a, like, kind of like I would say like a corporate drama. So totally different. Erastasis is fantasy / romantasy. So completely different. But I actually forgot about that. Like, at that point I was in uni. Then if you watched my previous episode, like, I got recruited into corporate, and like my dream job, I was making like real money starting from my early 20s. Like, that creative stuff like disappeared. Like, the moment I got that contract, I like, from my first like recruitment job, I like signed that stuff, forgot all about the creative stuff. I was like, great, now I've made it in corporate, I'm gonna like go do that now. I forgot all about it, and it was my husband that reminded me. He's like, you mentioned that on the night we met. I was like, I don't remember mentioning that actually, but okay. Because it was like 15 years ago at this point. But he was just like, you need to actually like kind of think about this. This is something that you shouldn't just ignore now and just have it be there. He was like, yeah, okay, you can do this on the side of your full corporate job, but he's like, you're sitting on something good here that you should take seriously now. And that for me was like the first real moment where I was like, oh. Like, actually till this point I was just like, okay, it's like just something I'm kind of doing. I was kind of keeping it a secret also, because I was like, people are gonna think I'm weird. Like, I have like a real career, and I'm like moonlighting, writing this like fantasy novel on the side. Like, it just kind of felt like maybe I don't want to like advertise this. People are gonna think I've lost my marbles. I was like keeping it this like deep dark secret. I don't even remember at what point I like told my own parents or my own sibling I was doing this, or like when I told my friends. I waited like months to tell my friends. I think one of my friends I waited till October. My other friends I waited till like months later. So I wasn't even telling anyone I was doing this, and it wasn't until this moment in October when my husband said that I was like, oh, like I didn't even think about like taking this seriously. But he was like, love, you need to really take this seriously now. Don't just let it be this thing that you kind of do as a hobby. He's like, this is something you really have a passion for. You love doing it. You've been doing it for free on the side, randomly during your free time, and it's like really good. Now, granted, this is like draft 2. Like, I go back and look at draft 2, I'm like, oh my God, like, what was I writing? I promise you draft 4 and draft 5 are much better now. Okay, so that was October when like this idea was kind of planted, where I'm like, what do I want to do about this now? So we flash forward to maybe around a couple of months ago. And the week leading up to this point. So I'd finished draft 3. I'm sending this to betas. My sister researched me the service. The manuscript has been finalized. And then at the same time during this week, because as luck would have it, sometimes in life I don't know, sometimes in life things just, God, I don't know. You guys need to go listen to my origin story episode if you haven't already. But there I talk about just sometimes there's these moments in life where the universe is screaming at you to make a decision. Because of course, it can't be so easy that it's so obvious. So during that same week, I finished my manuscript, and at the same time, I'm starting to put together the formula, the market research formula I created myself for the people in my own life that I wanted to read and provide feedback. So I would get professional anonymized data, and then I would also get rounded out with some information from some other people in my life. I've got a friend who works in publishing. I have 2 friends that read the genre, one voraciously, religiously, one where just it's a bit on and off. Someone who doesn't read fiction at all, someone who's not my typical target group, someone who doesn't read this genre at all. So I really had a mix of people. So I get a really well-rounded picture of the feedback to apply to my 4th draft before firing that off to my editor, which is where it is right now. It's sitting with my editor before we get to draft 5. I remember because I was meeting up with my friend who works in publishing for dinner, and that literally, she arrives at dinner and I get an email from a executive headhunter company. And it was a very, very prestigious headhunting company here in Germany. I knew it immediately. The moment I saw this person's name in this company, I was like, whoa, okay, you have my attention. I remember asking my friend at this moment, why is this happening now? And she's like, well, obviously because the universe wants you to make a decision, right? So if it were just okay, I make a decision to quit my corporate career and do this, then it is just okay, I made a decision to quit my corporate career. But now the universe is presenting me with options. It was saying, are you really sure you want to walk away? So, I should have just ignored the email, but I didn't. And I got on a call with the headhunter, and then we scheduled the first interview. The whole thing was so confidential. I had to sign an NDA before this headhunting company. It was really, like I said, prestigious headhunting company. They made me sign an NDA before they would even tell me who the client was, because the job was a VP1, very high profile, the company and the brand, and just the whole thing was going to be all the bells and whistles of a VP job, right? All the perks and the money and all the stuff. Incredible opportunity in terms of how much responsibility I would have and all that kind of stuff. So in that same week, I did my second interview, and the next step was my 3rd interview. And at the same time, because sometimes life just works out like this, then in the same week, another headhunter contacted me. And this was for a position, another VP job, huge growing brand, and a brand where I literally mentioned just a couple of months ago, if this company ever, sets up an office here, because it's global brand, but I was if they ever set up Munich as a European headquarter, I would be interested in working there. Boom, this brand a couple months later actually reached out and was we are opening our European headquarter here in Munich. So then at the same time, I was in talks with them. And then, a day after that, another headhunter contacted me for another very big, old established German company, one of those, the ones that are in manufacturing and all this kind of stuff. They've been around for over 100 years. And they're okay, we have a VP job that opened up. We want to move you to Singapore. So I'm sitting there at this point with this week being okay, the universe really wants me to make a choice now. What am I going to do? And the thing is, because it's recruitment, and the thing about head hunting exec recruitment is that when they contact you, they really want you. I know this from my own personal experience. When you're being, so I would say like the best positions, obviously, where I had the most negotiation power, where the recruitment process was super short, maybe like 1 or 2 interviews, and then I got the offer. And they usually give me what actually, in every case, I've always gotten what I've wanted in those scenarios. Like when you're being recruited, like you are in a position of negotiation power. Like they want you. When you're being exec headhunted is because you have a very particular skill set and they want it. So this is your moment. Any job that I've gotten where I had to apply myself, like I'm in the position of asking. So I never really was able to get everything I wanted. And I more often than not didn't get the job. That is a whole pod/episode/video in and of itself. I have failed so many times. I am not one of those people who gets jobs easily. Okay, I will tell that story a totally separate time. I am a total failure actually when it comes to getting jobs where I'm applying. Like nobody ever wants me. I don't know. Like maybe my resume is no good. I don't know. Either way, I'm a huge failure in that regard. But recruitment jobs are actually where I've always found my success. I've been recruited into a few jobs now in my career, but I knew that like, okay, if I have 3 headhunters reaching out for VP, like I'm gonna have a couple offers on the table by the end of the week. This is, by the way, the same week I finished my manuscript. And I'm like, meanwhile, super busy. Either remember, I am working exec job at this point, just finalized my manuscript, like interviewing for like 3 different exec jobs. Like I'm like up to like here now in stress at this point, right? Like it's just, I have a lot going on. And I remember the Thursday night before I made my decision, my husband's away on business this night. And I remember I like fall into I like go to sleep. I'm just like knackered. And I fall asleep and I have this dream. And in my dream, I still remember in such extreme vividness, like I'll never forget it. In this dream, I was standing on a bridge. And on one side of the bridge was like everyone, like society, like everyone I've ever met who's important or not important, who is allowed to pass judgment, not allowed to pass judgment on my life, just like society. Like obviously now looking at it in hindsight, and when I woke up and looking at the dream, like obviously the side of the bridge represented like society. And this side of the bridge was applauding. It was like all the fanfare. They were literally standing there applauding. And obviously this is symbolism in my mind, in my subconscious of like, this was symbolism in my mind of like, Viv, you're finally good enough. Congratulations for finally being good enough and having made it and proved to the world that you were good enough. And then on the other side of the bridge were all my characters, including the characters for Erastasis and for the second series, because at this point, the characters for my second series had already came into my mind while I was in Asia between Christmas and New Year's for vacation, and my second series already came broadcasting to my mind while I was there. And the main characters of that series also had already fully formed. And on the other side on the one side of the bridge was society applauding me for finally being good enough. And on the other side of the bridge were all my characters. And they were all just looking at me. And it's actually the MMC of the first trilogy within Erastasis. So Erastasis is 7 books, but the first 3 books are a trilogy, and the books 4, 5, and 6 are spin-offs that are chronologically, like follow chronologically, but they're spin-offs based on the different characters within the first trilogy. And then the 7th book is a prequel that basically explains this one very important event that triggers the start of the entire series. And it's purposeful that I released that book last. But the MMC of the trilogy, his name is Zachary Triton, but we call him Zach. And so I see all my characters on Zach's side of the bridge, and it's Zach who turns to me. Like, they're all looking at me, but it's Zach who looks at me and says something. And he says, "It's okay. I understand. And maybe you'll have time for us in 10 years. And he doesn't say this to guilt me in any way, of course. Like, that's just not Zach. Like, he actually means it. He's like, "It's okay. I understand. And maybe you'll have time for us in 10 years. So he's giving me permission to, like, put them on a shelf. He's like, "You don't have to feel bad. Like, we won't resent you. We won't try to guilt you into doing this. Like, you need to do what you need to do. And we'll," like, what he was basically saying is that, like, we'll be here waiting for you when you're ready. We'll be here waiting for you when you have time for us again. Like, we're here." And I know that sounds so absurd because it's like they're made up. But maybe anybody else who is an author maybe listening to this will understand it. Like, I don't know. Like, they came from my mind, but I didn't construct them. Like, it felt like I said at the start of this episode, they fell into my head fully formed. So you have to remember, like, I'm dreaming. Like, I have no control over anything that's happening, but it's such a vivid dream. Like, on one side, everyone's applauding. They're like, "Congratulations, Vivian, you're finally good enough. Like, you made it." And on the other side is all my characters, and they're just like, we'll be here. We'll be waiting here for you. And it's okay. So for them, they were like, "Don't worry about us. Like, if you choose corporate, if you choose VP over this, like, we get it." So this dream happens, and I wake up. I'm, like, alone. Like I said, my husband was away on business. He was coming home the next day. And I wake up and I'm, like, bawling. Like, how could you not, right? Like, imagine yourself in my position. I just have this such an emotional moment in this dream. Like, I'm, like, literally looking at Zach's face as he's saying this to me. And I see the identical expression on all my other characters' faces where they're like, "It's okay." Like, they're like, we're happy for you. Like, go do this. And I wake up and I'm bawling. And I'm sitting there, and I remember it's like, I look at the phone, it's like 2:30 in the morning. And I live in Munich, Germany. Most of my family still lives in Toronto. We've got a 6-hour time difference. So, like, thank goodness, it's like 2:30 in the morning. My husband's not there, but, like, I knew my sister was still awake. And I started messaging her, and she's like, "What are you doing up? It's like 2:30 in the morning." And I just told her, I like bashed up, I'm like typing, like lying there in bed, like sobbing. And I'm messaging her, telling her, like, I just had this dream, and I don't think I can walk away. Like, I don't think I can walk away from this dream and this story and these characters, because honestly, like, I need to be honest with myself. Like, how long can I pull that off for? Like, at that point, it's like 7.5 months of, like, working exec. Like, anyone who's ever been an exec, like, I think you know what that's like the responsibility, the hours, the pressure. And then meanwhile, like, feeling like I was, like, living the second life. Like, you know, in those superhero movies where, like, Peter Parker lives, like, a whole second life, and it starts taking a toll on his real life. Like, I'm not saying I'm Spider-Man, but, like, you can kind of, like, it's just, like, the analogy I use of, like, maybe you can imagine what that's like. Like, I wasn't really telling anyone I was working on this book. No one really knew what was going on with me. And I felt like I was, like, living this whole other life. And meanwhile, like, yeah, okay, for the 7.5 months, I was able to pull off. It was fun. I was able to do both. But, like, realistically, how long can I keep that up for? Like at some point, which I know now, like I had to do dev edits. Dev edits, I did that after I quit already. I was doing that full time, 100 hours a week, and it still took me 7 weeks. So like, can you imagine how long that would have taken if I would have been working full time? Like it's just not sustainable, this model. I know a lot of people do it for like a really long time, but it's just like your timeline just slows down. Like you only have 24 hours a day. Everyone only does. And working corporate meant that I'd be giving my best hours, right? Like mornings is where I work best, and I'd be giving them my best hours. And then my characters and my author career and like my real passion, like it would get whatever was left over. And I remember messaging with my sister being like, I just don't think I can walk away anymore from this. And we were just chatting, and she's like, well, like, Viv, like, I think you already made your choice, right? She's like, don't make the decision right now, like 2:30 in the morning while you're super emotional. But she's like, I think you already did make your choice. And for me, I realized also in that moment that I had already. Like, to be honest, like I made my choice the moment I started writing this thing. Because the type of person that I am, I wouldn't have done this. Like, I wouldn't have spent so much time on this. Like, I would have maybe like written a couple of scenes and then given up, because I'd be like, no, I'm not really that into this, and it's a lot of time, and like chances of success are really low and all that kind of stuff. But like the fact that I, at that point, brought it all the way to draft 3, and I was like paying good money to hire professionals to beta read the book. I mean, by that point, like, let's be honest, like I had already made my choice that I was going to take this thing seriously. And one entrepreneur actually gave me like one of the best pieces of advice a couple of years ago during a job application process that went horribly, actually. So you know how I mentioned before that every time I've tried to apply for a job, I'm like a total failure. Like I said, like most of my jobs I've gotten through recruitment, where they were actively seeking me. Other than my first job ever, that was a recruitment job too, but I had applied while I was in school. I've never been successful at the application process. I don't know. Like some people really are. They apply to like 2 jobs, they get 2 offers, they pick one, and that's it. I'm one of those people where it's like, I've never been successful other than that one time when I applied for a job. It's always been like recruitment. They were actively seeking me. But so the interviewer from that application process that like did not go well and did not go in my favor, as usual. But this interviewer gave me such a good piece of advice, because I've always had this entrepreneurial streak in me. And this interviewer came into this job and was the hiring manager for this job, because this person had also come from entrepreneurship. So this person had started their own business, sold it, and then went back into corporate. In the interviewing process, I was kind of asking her about her experience being an entrepreneur, and I said, you know, it's also something that I definitely want to do in my career. I want to end my career not working for somebody else, but working for myself. And I was talking about like side hustle, main hustle, having a side hustle, then turning into the main hustle. And she actually told me, you know, Vivian, the thing about entrepreneurship is you're going to realize that when you have like that idea and when you have that passion and when that comes to you, you're going to want to do it full time. Like she wasn't even saying to make it successful, you need to do it full time. But she says like when you have that moment where you realize what it is, you're going to want to do it full time. And she was so right. Right? Like for me, the longest time was I was like, so both my husband and I, we were like, yeah, we want to do our own thing. We want to like, you know, try our hand at doing our own thing. We just never really knew what that thing was going to be. And then of course, last June, I had this idea. By October, that seed had kind of been planned to like, maybe this is what I will try my hand at. There's no promise of success. I might be a complete failure. But it's a chance. And the thing is, I found something I'm so passionate about, I love so much, that like this interviewer had been right. Like, she's like, when that moment comes, you're not gonna want to split your attention. And she's totally right. Like, I got to the point where I was like, this dream has just told me that I don't want to anymore. I don't want to walk away. And so I had this dream. It was an incredibly emotional moment. I gave myself, after then, like, hours to think about it. I woke up the next morning, and I don't know, I woke up the next morning, I still felt the same way. I waited a couple more hours, still felt the same way. I made my decision, held back on it for a bit, still felt the same way. Days later, still like today, I still feel the same way. Like, this whole time now, it's been months since I made the decision. Not once have I regretted it. Has it been hard? Have I had moments of doubt? Do I fear failure? Am I terrified sometimes? Absolutely. Like, it's better now, but like the first 2 months after making the decision, I was haunted daily by self-doubt. Like, by daily, I mean like every 10 minutes, I was like, oh my God, this was a horrible mistake. I've lost my mind. What are people gonna think? Like, all of the typical self-doubt topics. It's better now, right? I don't think this all the time now. But I have all these self-doubts. I have negative moments, but not once have I been like, I actually regret the decision. Not once have I been like, wow, that was like a knee-jerk emotional reaction. I shouldn't have done it. I look back and I'm like, I would do it again. Like, that's the thing. Even at the hardest moments, working in my 7th hour of 100-hour weeks, doing dev edits, and I was just so finished with it. I was like, I don't want to write Call of Matter anymore. I want to just move on to the second book, or go on vacation, or just take a break, whatever. You know, I did a social media post about it where I was like celebrating the end of my dev edits, and I wrote the caption, me, I chose this life, and then I captioned Zach saying, me too, and I would do it again. I meant that. Like, that wasn't just marketing. That wasn't just me like writing something for social media. That's actually what was going through my head. Like, I was doing this. I was working like 16-hour days, and I would go to bed at night and be like, I would still choose this. That's how much I love it. It's so much hard work, but I love it. Like, I love this story. I like love doing this. And I would do it again. I would choose it again. That's the craziest part. Like, I don't know. I think anybody who has a passion like this will absolutely understand what I'm saying. Anyone listening to this who doesn't is going to be like, maybe you have lost your marbles. But that's also the thing. Like, I don't care. I think it's a mix of like age. It's a mix of like, once you take the step, you realize you spend way less time worrying about what other people think. You just think about like, this is my life. This is like how I want to live it. And so I would do it again. But that's my story of like how I made this decision, obviously based on like real rational metrics. Like, I mean, I don't want to like oversimplify and be like, oh, I just did it on a whim. Like, this is not true. Like, I've been working corporate for 14 years. I have been like working tirelessly for 20 something years to build up to this point, building up my CV, padding my resume, making the right strategic choices, saving money. So I will have a whole other episode on that. Like, how do I afford my lifestyle? Very smart financial decisions when I was very young, and like being very strategic in terms of like how I manage my finances, how I manage my life so I can do this. So it's not just like, oh, I just did it on a whim. I don't worry about anything. Like, sure, I worry about things. I spent over a decade saving and investing tirelessly. I own my home. I have no one bankrolling me. I do not come from money. I come from an immigrant family. My parents struggled to give my sister and I the opportunities that we had, being new immigrants in Canada. I am not being bankrolled by my husband, not being bankrolled by my husband's family. I do this all myself. Like, obviously we have like shared finances, so we do everything together, but it's not that I'm like coasting off of anyone else's support. Like, I had to earn my way to this point to be able to do what I'm doing now. So it's not like, oh my God, this big whim. I just made this like romantic decision and now I'm like chasing my dreams like in some movie. Like, this is not what's happening. Every brick has been built tirelessly to get me to this point, but the decision itself for that week, like the 3 headhunters chasing, the finished manuscript, like all the everything coming together in this moment to make this decision, at the end of the day, the real catalyst and trigger of all of this was that dream the night before I made the decision. Was like this sign from my subconscious of what I ultimately should do, which is why I really want you to go back and listen to my other episode before this, where I talk about how I got to this point, how I worked for free at 20, how I quit my dream job at 25, how at 35 I quit the dream career to go do what I always wanted. So I will link it for sure on YouTube. I need to figure out how I'm going to link that for a podcast. I'm like learning as I'm going, so I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I will find a way to link that episode, because that's really the episode where I really talk about every decision I've made, like the biggest ones, how they were all completely emotional decisions where I took the leap and it ended up being the best decision I've ever made. I can't say if this author thing was the best or the worst decision I've ever made. I don't know. I haven't gotten to the end of that story yet. But I can tell you for the other times where I've made that decision, I did make it to the end of those stories, and I can tell you they were the best decisions I've ever made. But I just wanted to share that story because it's a story very near and dear to my heart. It's super personal. It's very emotional for me, but I wanted to share it because I also want you to have a bit of a picture in terms of the person that I am, what you can expect when you read my writing, when you read Erastasis, when you read Call of Matter. If you like this kind of energy, then you can for sure expect to find way more of that in my series. And if you like my energy and you're not really quite sure where to take it, I mean, feel free to just listen along, follow along, hit the subscribe button. There will be much more of this kind of stuff coming up. Thank you so much for your time, and till next time.